The 2024 SWAC Tournament is in the books, and Grambling State and Jackson State find themselves victorious in dancing in the NCAA Tournament. Oh yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. And these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, and that's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. We're all about the SWAC tournament today. We have Reggie Theus' complaints about the schedule of the SWAC tournament. We have Jackson State, who has cemented their status as a dynasty, if you were even still questioning it. And Jackson State wins their first ever SWAC tournament championship. It's kind of crazy. To be honest with you, it's kind of crazy to think that they've never won a SWAC tournament before, but these are the truths. These are the facts. And they knocked off Texas Southern, a team that beat them in the tournament finals last year. Role reversal, Grambling State comes out victorious. It's a whole lot of Tigers that we talking about. All the way from the beginning of the show, all the way down to segment 3, really, it's all about the Tigers. That's what the SWAC tournament was about. So forgive me for the little confusion, but you have Texas Southern versus Grambling, and Grambling was just better. Simple and plain. Grambling was the better team. There's no other way to put it. There's no other way to need to put it. Grambling State was better than Texas Southern in the SWAC championship, and that's why they came out victorious. They showed it from the minute the game started, and there was 2, maybe 3 aspects that I really want to highlight when it comes to this game. And you have the three-point shot, defensive strategy, and then also the performance of stars. That's how I want to look at it, because you can't win them all. You can't win them all, and we've done our fair share. So I'm not over here even really remotely sad about it. Shout out to Grambling. Go do your thing. Go dance in the first 4. Get another win. Get the SWAC some more money. All right? That's the way I look at it personally. But when it comes to this game, I didn't want to lose it. I was bugged by it, but I accepted it very early, because when Grambling got off to that hot start offensively, it was really about the three-point shot. Jordan Smith came in and he was fired. I mean, he was lighting it up. It was ridiculous how well that Grambling was shooting the three-point game in the biggest game of or the three-point shot in the biggest game of their season. Like, it reached a point. It reached a point where Grambling would shoot a 3 and I'd close my eyes and I just wait for the dunk to happen, which was a hit in the rim. I didn't wait. I hoped, because at that point it felt like I would never hear the dunk, and I never did, right? Like, they started off 7 of 11 in the first half. They were shooting absolutely exceptionally, and TSU had good offense to start the game. TSU looked like, okay, this is about to be a competitive matchup. The problem is they kept making 2s while Grambling was making 3s. Now, if you make the same amount of shots, but every shot you make is worth more than the shot that I make, guess who's going to win that game? You are. You're going to win it. And I think that Texas Southern realized that, because then they started taking more 3s. That's how it felt to me personally. It felt as if they knew they couldn't keep settling for twos because they couldn't stop Grambling from getting threes. That's what it felt like. The problem is they weren't making a lot of them. I got a funny stat for you. Grambling is the second most efficient SWAC school in shooting threes, right? So they have the second best team 3-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, Texas Southern has made the second most threes in the SWAC. So you have the team that makes the second most versus the team that has the second best efficiency. The efficient team is who won, and it showed. In the 3-point battle, that stat showed because Texas Southern, for as many threes as they make, they don't shoot them exceptionally well. They're pretty average when it comes to it, but they chunk up a bunch of them. So they end up making a large amount, but they weren't making in the first half. Grambling, I don't know how they rank as far as the amount made, but they're very efficient when they do take them. And it showed. The team chunked up a bunch versus the team that just made the ones that they had. Now, three-point shooting kind of wore off as time went on because Grambling just they went 7 of 11 and they ended up at one point it was 8 of 19, which means they only made one of their next 8. But the three-pointer that they made might have been the biggest three-pointer of the game. And it's something that we bring up with the stars later on. But that 3-point shooting was just such a drastic difference. And it was the thing that probably jumped out to you more than anybody else. Then you look at defensive game planning. And I think this is one of the reasons that TSU didn't have a great 3-point shooting night. Grambling did a great job of making TSU run the perimeter like a defensive end. You ever seen those when they say run the hoop, where the defensive end is just going around and trying to bending as if he's rushing towards the quarterback? That's what it was like for TSU on offense. Completely different sport, but I think it was a pretty accurate analogy because TSU wanted to penetrate. When you look at what they were doing in the SWAC tournament, it was a lot of penetration and kicking. That's what I personally saw as their best form of, maybe not best form of offense, but it was their best 3-point shots, right? They didn't get a lot of, I'm going to create off the dribble 3 points. They had a lot of penetrate to the lane, kick out to the corner. But when you're running the perimeter, right, the 3-point line, the spacing isn't that good because when you penetrate, now they're collapsing, right? Now they're coming into the paint to try to stop you, kick out, nobody's there. But if you're just running right there on the 3-point line, you pass it out, the person's there. The defender's already there. They never went down to the paint. So now it was just a significantly, I would say, disjointed offense after a while. And I think it happened once they started trying to take more threes. And then the last thing that I'll look at is the star players, because you had PJ Henry and Jonathan Cece versus Kentavious Dozier, and then also you had Tremichael Moten, excuse me. The difference is Grambling star, or at least a star, showed up when he needed to. And I don't feel like that was the case for Texas Southern. Both had underrated players step up in the beginning of the game. Deion Stroud really had a good start to the first half, but it was nobody else really. I'm not dependent on Stroud to be my guy, and nobody else is helping him. And then you look at Jordan Smith, who I mentioned had those 3 threes at the beginning of the game. He was the person who really pushed Grambling ahead, and Grambling built up such a lead that it was difficult for TSU to come back. It was very similar to how Jackson State was trying to come back from a first quarter or first half deficit, and they got close, but they just couldn't make up enough. It was too much ground against a team that was too good to allow that much of a deficit be collapsed. That's where TSU was. But instead of being the team with the lead, they were the team trying to chew on the deficit, right? That's who they were in this game. So let's get to those stars, Cece and Henry. Henry was clearly affected when you just look at how much time he played. He had a bad ankle injury in the semifinals that kept him out. Ironically, when he left, that's when the offense began to slow down. And then you look at this game, he didn't play that much, and the offense began to slow down a little bit. I think it's because Grambling already had a really good scheme. I don't know if PJ Henry would have stopped the scheme that much, but once it was just Cece, it was like, okay, we just need to key in on this guy. I feel like that made it much simpler for them. But then also, I didn't think Cece was that good in the first half. I think that in the second half, he was a key part of them trying to come back, but it was too little too late. That's not what I want my stars to do. I don't want my stars to turn it up when you're down 20, trying to make up the difference. Yeah, he had 21 points. He might have been a leading scorer. I think he was. I think he had the most points of anybody in the game. But the problem is 17, 19 of those points came in the second half when you're trying to eat away at a deficit. His lack of production was a big reason on why they weren't able to get, or why they were even in that deficit. Not to put it all on him, but as a star, we're looking at you in these games. Yeah, Stroud did a good job, but we're looking at you in these games. What are you going to do? And you look at Grambling, they had an all-around successful offense, right? But then also on the other hand, you look at not Dozier, but Moten in the end of the game, when TSU was making that push and it feels like, okay, TSU might be able to get through. Who delivered the dagger? Who delivered the eighth 3-pointer? That was Moten. Tremichael Moten. When TSU, right, because they had a pretty large lead. Grambling had a pretty large lead the majority of the second half. But TSU at one point did get down to single digits. And then that's when Moten turned up. Moten had an assist. Then he made a jumper. Then he made that 3-pointer. And I mentioned how 3-point shooting was a big deal. And though they went dry, Grambling started off 7 of 11. And at one point, they were at 8 and 19. That 8th 3-pointer, the first making 8 attempts, was the 3-pointer for me that ended up being the dagger. That was the moment where I said, that's it. I already felt like it was it mentally. But that's when I was just like, that's really it. Not waving the white flag because I've never been a coward. But but it was at that moment I said, yeah, any hopes of a comeback, that's it. Tremichael Moten, that's what your stars need to do. He only had 8 points on the game. Not a great game for him, but 5 of those points came when he was answering back at Texas Southern, who was trying to make a rally. If you're not going to be great the whole game, be great when I need you to be. And that's what Tremichael Moten was. And that's what stars do, because stars are the guys that we look at when it comes to SWAC championship, SWAC tournament games throughout the entire tournament, but specifically in the finals. Now, as we push forward, one team that's very familiar with the SWAC finals is Jackson State women's basketball. I don't know when you started calling them a dynasty, but all I know is that now it's undeniable. So from one fallen dynasty in Texas Southern to one that is either expanding or cementing their status as one in Jackson State, let's keep rolling with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan, and Nissan is helping us break down March Madness. So we highlight the bracket, which became official today. Each week, we are picking out one team that stands out and a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like all of the new 2024 Nissan SUVs. These ladies specifically were able to take it to the next level. Jackson State women's basketball can only be described as an armada because they were the top seed in the SWAC tournament. They dominated all the way through, and they're as hardcore as it gets. So it's no wonder that they had the highest seed of any HBCU in the NCAA tournament after winning their third SWAC championship, their third SWAC tournament championship. So go to nissanusa.com and check out the long line of Nissan SUVs, whether that's the Armada, the Pathfinder, or the Rogue. Go to nissanusa.com and check them all out. Today's episode is also brought to you by Amazon Fire TV, and I love these things, man. The display is amazing. It allows me to know suggestions. It allows me to know my favorites. It allows me to know everything and see it all very quickly and make a decision. No more scrolling through a bunch of different channels to try to figure out. It's all right there for you. But I already know what you're watching. You're watching that March Madness. You're watching Locked On HBCU. You're watching Locked On College Basketball. You're watching all of these things, and they're all available on the Fire TV channel. So go to Fire TV channels. You can check out March Madness, the opening weekend of baseball, cooking videos, how-to videos. You can catch your favorite brands like Locked On or NCAA, MLB, NFL, everything on your Fire TV. If you don't have a Fire TV, you can get your Fire Stick, and it works just the same. Matter of fact, want to learn more about it? Go to Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. That's Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day for your second listen. Make sure you're checking out Locked on College Basketball Bracket Breakdown Show, and it's now available on the Locked on College Basketball podcast. You have Andy and Isaac, who are the experts breaking down their brackets and discussing everything that you need to know to fill out a winning bracket and prepare for this year's NCAA tournament. Find the Locked on Bracket Breakdown now on the Locked on College Basketball podcast, wherever you get your podcast. I have a question for you, and I legitimately want to know. This is something I haven't really thought about, but it's a question for you. At what point did you consider Jackson State women's basketball a dynasty? At what point do you say the Jackson State Lady Tigers are a dynasty on the court? I don't think there's any question that they are now. If you're still questioning the dynasty or dynastic credentials, I have to question your motives, because what more do you need to see? What more do they need to accomplish to where you say dynasty? It's a legitimate question. But to me, I don't feel like there's a debate. Jackson State women's basketball is a dynasty. That is a fact. But at what point did it become a fact? That's the difference. Because I was sitting there racking my brain thinking, how do I speak about a dynasty that is so dominant? But then that dynasty word popped out, and I said, let's speak on that, because I just said it so effortlessly. It just flowed off my tongue. And I was talking to my pops earlier today, and I said it. I was like, hey, man, I don't know how I'm going to talk about Jackson State, right? And when I said dynasty, I said, never mind. I found the avenue, because I'm not sure when I considered them that. For me, I'll tell you my answer. I'm not sure when they were universally considered that. About 2 weeks ago, I spoke about the era of Jackson State and how dominant they've been. I don't think era is the right word to describe it anymore. I feel like I have to say dynasty. In the NFL, we talk about a dynasty as 3 championships. If you can win 3 championships in a certain amount of time, you're a dynasty. And now you look at Jackson State, who they've won 3 SWAC tournament titles in 5 years. That would qualify as 3 championships in a certain amount of time. That is a dynasty without a doubt. The weird thing about them is they've been dominant for more than 3 years. They've been dominant for 5 in a row. They've now won 5 SWAC titles: 2020, 2021, 22, 23, and now 24. In the words of Booker T, they had a 5-time SWAC tournament champions, or excuse me, SWAC regular season champions. There we go. That's it. And that's the difficulty, is they've been dominant, but they just got their 3rd title in the tournament. So that becomes the question. For me, I said they were a dynasty in 2022, because in 2020, COVID stopped the world. Specifically, it stopped the SWAC tournament. We don't know what happens in that game, but what we do know is the Jackson State Lady Tigers were your regular season champions. And for me, because there was no tournament, I equate the 2020 regular season title to any other year's postseason title. So to me, Jackson State had 3 in a row. 2020, because they came back and won in 21. They came back and won in 22. To me, that was 3 championships in a row. And that's when I would be ready to crown them as a dynasty. But the question goes to you. And I think that the question within the question is, how do you feel about 2020? Do you count that as a legit championship? Is that half a championship? Because we know the regular season title is impressive, but the postseason title is what really counts, which is why when I came on there and I said Jackson State was the best team last year, somebody had I don't even say audacity, but somebody felt the need to challenge me on that, because they didn't win it all. When I thought it was crystal clear that they were the best team. They just got one time in a tournament. The best team doesn't always win. But you hear that thought process, right? So I don't know how you would personally feel about the 2020 championship. Let's go through the resume. Let me give you all of the numbers that you may need to know. And there's a clear start date to the era, dynasty, whatever you want to say. It's the hiring of Tamika Reed. And that's April 2018. So going into the 18-19 season, that's what you're looking at. In 2019, and we're only going to use the ending years. 2019, they hit the SWAC finals. 2020, regular season title. COVID ends everything. Nothing happens from there. Only one game into the tournament. So I'm counting them as a championship, but whatever. Matter of fact, let me start over because I don't want to jade you with my opinion. You had the SWAC finals in 2019, won a regular season title in 2020, but the tournament got canceled. 2021, regular season and tournament champions, you were a 15 seed. 2022, regular season and tournament champions, you were a 14 seed, undefeated conference record. 2023, you were the regular season champs and you lost in the second round. 2024, you're the regular season and tournament champs, and they are the 14 seed, which we will speak about either Wednesday or Thursday. Depends on when that game is coming up and everything. But that's what we're looking at, y'all. You're looking at 6, skipping the COVID year. So let's just say 5 consecutive either SWAC finals or regular season champion, tournament champions, something, right? What are we arguing? I don't know. What are we arguing? That's 5 consecutive regular season titles, only 1 tournament lost in that span. For me, I was ready to crown them after a regular season title, cancel tournament, and then 2 more regular season or tournament championships. They've been the best team in this conference for 5 years. If you needed 3 to consider them a dynasty, they've got it done. But there's no question that they are a dynasty. I may have recognized that a little bit earlier than some, but I would love to know when you recognized that they were a dynasty. Now, as we keep pushing, is there a problem with the SWAC tournament scheduling? Reggie Theus, the Bethune Cookman athletic director and head men's basketball coach, seems to believe that there is. So let's get into his claim and see if I believe that to be valid as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is the #1 place for all of my small business owners. If you're trying to fill that void that Jonathan left because he went ahead, you know what? He moved from Jackson and he moved over to Houston. So now in Jackson, they'd have a new void. Well, don't worry about it, Jonathan. You go ahead and get Jamal, right? Jamal's on LinkedIn. Everybody's on LinkedIn. And when I say everybody, I mean 800 million people on a daily basis. Like, that is a ridiculous sample size, but it's something that you see on a daily and weekly basis with LinkedIn. And they help you find your right team members for free and faster. Who doesn't want to find the person that can help them make money and do it for free? There's absolutely no risk. It's only rewards. So go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. You can use the purple hashtag hiring frame, and you'll be able to get the right people for your team faster. It's just that simple. Go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege and post your job for free. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Is there a flaw in the SWAC tournament scheduling? Prior to Bethune-Cookman getting whooped by Grambling State, athletic director and head men's basketball coach Reggie Theus said that I think that this is a flaw in the system. A flaw in the system that the tournament schedules the 4 versus 5 for the last game on Thursday, and then they have to come in and play the first seed as the first men's game on Friday. Meanwhile, the first seed played on Wednesday. So it's too much of a long gap and not enough time in between. Originally, I thought the timing was important. Originally, I thought the timing of his statement was an important piece of this conversation, because he named it before they got beat. And yes, I add whooped on purpose because it does add to how people view this situation. When you say it before, it sounds like you're making excuses, preemptive excuses at that, conceding defeat. I told you I don't wave the white flag, but it certainly felt like Reggie Theus was already, if not waving it, he was grabbing it in preparation for waving it. But if you say it after, sounds like you're making excuses. To me, it's largely irrelevant, but at the same time, it does allow for some people to maybe have this conversation a little more. People like, look, you just got whooped. That's the only reason you saying this. They're going to devalue what you have to say. But let's attack the point itself. I'm not going to hit them with the just win more games. To me, that's lazy, because somebody has to be in this situation every year. Everybody can't win more games. So And I also think that telling him to just win more is like, okay, but if it's really a flaw, then it needs to be fixed. And it kind of just gets away from it. It's like, stop crying. I don't know if I feel that way. So I wanted to actually look to see if I thought it was a flaw. If we're speaking from a health standpoint, oh yeah, that's a problem. If we're speaking from a health standpoint, that is not a good thing. But if we're not, and we're talking about a competitive edge, I don't think this really has much legs to stand on. I don't. Because if you're saying playing the last game at 9-10, whenever it ended, right? And then coming back around 2:00, I mean, I think that's how tournaments been working since the beginning of time. Like, I never played ball. I didn't play AAU or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure they were doing it. So as long as it's safe, we want to talk about competitive edge at that point, then maybe you start saying to win more games, because at the end of the day, I believe the number one seed deserves infinite perks. And that brings me to the quote. Theus says, if you win the league, you should have a perk, but getting a day off and the early game is 2 perks. That's where the problem is for me. I don't have that problem. Do I think that 4 versus 5 could switch with 3 versus 6 and it'd be way more fair? Yes. But at the same time, I'm not finna sit here and complain about the number one seed getting every single perk. I'm not doing it, because that's what they won the regular season for. It's not about it being a disadvantage for you. Sometimes we have to just take a step back, right? And I'm not in this situation, so it's easy for me to do this. It's not always about you. Sometimes it's about the other side. Maybe it's about Grambling. It's not about 4 or 5. It's about 1. It's about the fact that in a SWAC tournament, a conference tournament, if you are going to set up the tournament for every advantage to go the way of the number one seed, how can I say that's wrong? Reggie Theus might have a point. Playing 4 versus 5 as the last game and then coming back and playing the first men's game of the next day, it is a disadvantage to you. But the truth is, it's not created to have 4 and 5 in mind. The SWAC tournament is created to have the number one seed in mind. Matter of fact, you might want to be thankful that they don't play the first game. The 2 seed played before them. It could be even worse for you. But that's the way that I look at it. If we're really having this conversation in good faith, no one is thinking about Southern or Bethune-Cookman, who are the 5th and 4th seeds. They're thinking about Grambling State in the 1st seed. They're thinking about, how can we give this team, whoever fills that spot, how can we give this team the most advantage? And quite frankly, I see no problem with giving the tournament advantage to the team that won the regular season title, because you earned it. No, I don't believe that they should have 1 perk. They deserve to have 2 perks, 3 perks, 4 perks, 5 perks. Be a bunch of little Perkins running around like ESPN, if that's what it calls for, because you won the regular season title and you earned everything that you're getting, every advantage that you're getting. Yes, it is a competitive disadvantage for you, but we don't care, because it's a competitive advantage for the 1st seed. We're not looking at the 4-5. We're looking at the 1. Change the perspective, and I think that's what we'll really be seeing going forward. I don't think there'll be any problems. I don't think anybody's going to complain or get this moved. That's my personal view on it. So as we push forward, or not even push forward, as we wrap up today's episode, tomorrow we'll be back with the MEAC, and I think we'll probably talk a little bit of Grambling, because Grambling made the first 4. Grambling made the first 4, and then Jackson State made 14. So we'll look at Norfolk State, or not Norfolk, Norfolk State women's basketball, and then Howard men's basketball on tomorrow's episode and their seeding. And we'll probably look at the Grambling game, depending on if that's on Tuesday or Wednesday. So I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out the Locked On College Basketball channel for the Bracket Breakdown show. And in the meantime, in between time, till next time we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.